So Samantha, Shank, welcome to the Homeschool Project podcast. How are you doing?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thank you
Yes.
for coming on and joining us. You are coming to us from Indiana, right?
Yeah, I live in Mishawaka, Indiana, so it's really close to Notre Dame, like the Fighting Irish. That's what we're known for.
Okay, so close to Notre Dame. That is the one thing I know that exists in Indiana.
That's about all we have. So
So when I can picture a lot of states, and I can think of what it might look like when I go there. When I try to picture Indiana, I go blank. I have no idea what
Yeah.
Indiana is supposed to look like.
cornfields,
Okay, cornfields, there it is.
and then the Golden Dome in the midst of the cornfields.
I've seen some pictures actually that it looks pretty in some parts of the state. Not what I would have expected.
I think like towards the Indianapolis area, they have a lot of like things going on downtown and the more like attractions, I guess.
Sure.
But up where I live, like all we have is Notre Dame. So
Will you hold on tight to that, please?
yes.
So we had you on today. We wanted to, we always start with a little background information about our guests, right? So if you can start and tell us a little about your story, a little bit about your family, maybe your homeschooling history, your collegiate history, and then what you do now.
Okay, so I started homeschooling back in 4th grade. At the time, both of my parents worked full-time, and we didn't really know a lot about homeschooling. My parents had dabbled in it a little bit with my younger sister, but all we knew that with the public school just wasn't working for me personally. I had 2 sisters, and all of us were just kind of like, I mean, we're not learning anything. It's taking up a big chunk of our day. We'd rather be doing other things with our time. But on the other hand, both of my parents worked full-time, so it was just a lot. But my parents kind of agreed. They're like, well, if you can like homeschool yourself, if you can do a lot of the main work, we can help you afterward. But I mean, the majority of the teaching is going to have to be done like in the lobby while my mom was a hairstylist. And so that's kind of where I would do a lot of the work. It turned out really well. It ended up really working. I liked having flexibility. I liked being done with my school before lunchtime and having that whole rest of my day to do things that I wanted to do and things that I wanted to learn. And then I think it was the next year, my sisters were like, oh my gosh, Samantha's done with her schoolwork by noon. We want to be like that too. So they ended up becoming homeschooled for several years. Both of them actually ended up graduating from a public high school. My parents gave us a decision each year. Do you want to keep homeschooling? Do you not want to? This is like completely up to this is your decision. And ultimately both of my sisters ended up graduating from a public school, but I loved homeschooling. I loved the flexibility it offered. I love having a completely flexible schedule. Throughout high school, I was doing a lot of speaking in public schools, and I wouldn't have been able to do any of that if I were like in a public school setting, actually being the one in that classroom. So I loved all the different flexibilities it offered. And then in high school, that's when I decided, I do want to go to college ultimately. I want to try to graduate debt-free. So I started working and building towards that. And I was able to earn some college credit while still in high school, which was another benefit of homeschooling. And I was able to graduate both high school and college early, which I don't think I would have been able to do if I would have gone to public school. Wow. So I graduated about in 2018. Seems like a long time ago, but 2018. And I had finished in 2.5 years. And I credit a lot of that due to homeschooling and the flexibility it offered and just the life skills I learned along the way. And then right now I am working full-time at my business, Learn and Color. I create homeschool resources for all grades, and I love what I do. And I had started this back when I was 14 years old as a homeschool student, and just being like home all the time and being able to have all of that flexibility with my time and not spending 8 hours a day in the classroom and then a bunch of time doing homework or extracurriculars. I was able to spend like 4 hours doing my schoolwork and the rest of that time building my business and my brand. And that all played a really crucial part in me graduating early and me being able to graduate debt free. And so I owe a lot to homeschooling.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. That's the story that most people want to hear when they homeschool their kids. Seriously. Now you gave a lot of positives and, about your homeschooling experience. You started learning color when you were 14. Mm-hmm. How did you get that entrepreneurial mindset? Was that from homeschooling? Was that from watching your mom when you were doing your schoolwork, sitting there watching her work during the day, or was it from somewhere else?
I think with me and my sisters, I think it's always been like a part of our lives. So my dad is a firefighter, my mom is a hairstylist, and somewhere I don't even remember when, maybe 12 or 13 years ago. I think it's been longer, but they decided to start a vending machine business. So they both have the full-time jobs, but they're like, "Hey, why not? Let's start a vending machine business." And that's completely snowballed from there. So I guess I've always grown up with like an entrepreneurship spirit. My sisters and I loved creating lemonade stands when we were younger. We had a Kool-Aid stand. We loved running our parents' garage sales. So I've always loved being able to make my own money. I guess my brain is just built for business in a lot of ways. And even when I'm talking to friends, they're like, you have such a business mindset. I was just helping a friend budget a couple days ago for fun because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my jam. Let me help you with this. So I do think part of it is just my personality and just some of the interests. But like I said, my parents have grown this crazy business from like 10 machines to several hundred around the northern Indiana region. And so I think it's always just been a part of my life.
Well, you say it's part this type of person you are, but I think a big part as well, like you said, is when you see that as a kid growing up,
Mm-hmm.
it lets you know that that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
go ahead.
Oh yeah, I think that that's a big part of it too, because especially when I was in high school, people were like, well, what do you wanting to do when you are like done with college, when you're an adult? And I'm like, I want to be an entrepreneur. And throughout college, people were constantly asking me, are you going to find a job? I'm like, no, I already have a job. And I also make more money than a lot of my peers do. So I think just like having that mindset, like saying, yes, entrepreneurship is possible. I got connected with a lot of great people while I was still in high school and a lot of business meetings because I was the youngest person there. And I stood up in a very positive way because of that. And I had a lot of great business owners like locally give me a lot of advice. I just had one of them help me file my trademark. So I had such a great network and support in the community. And I think a lot of communities have those resources. You just have to look for them and knowing where to look for them. For me, it was my local chamber of commerce, but any type of business network locally, I think can really help too, because communities love seeing their young people succeed. And when you are a young person with ambition and passion, like adults love to help you out. I love mentoring other young students in high school. And so I think it's really easy to find people that want to give back to their community if you just take that initiative and say, hey, I need some help. Can you help me with XYZ? And I've noticed a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people are going to be willing to help you out.
Well, that's because they know what the opposite of that looks like.
Yeah.
Of the
And there are some people that are like rude about it, but they're few and far between. You have to look positive.
Oh no, and I mean, when you say when the younger people in the community want to make a difference and are willing to work for it, and these people are excited to see that, it's because they know what the opposite of that looks like.
Oh, and that too,
yeah. And they snatch onto people like you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's awesome. But you mentioned that you would go to business meetings in high school.
Yeah.
Right. So number one, do you think that would have been possible if you were at school for 8 to 9 hours a day? And number two, where did you fit that in? And like, how did you get yourself into those meetings?
So this all started back a little bit. It was actually after I started Learning Color. At the time, Learning Color was just a blog. I wasn't making any money off of it, just with like some random affiliate links, like $12 a month. So I mean, I was making nothing on this website. But I started a local entrepreneurship course through our local chamber of commerce, and through that's where I made a lot of the connections. I'm still friends with a lot of people that were involved in that program. And then at the very end of that, this was for a completely separate business. It was just for like the class model. But I was able to get $1,200 in like startup funds, kind of like Shark Tank style. But the thing was, I didn't have to pay the money back.
Right.
So that helped fund the previous business that I was doing in high school. But those skills and those connections I made were what really have helped me throughout the school year. And then a lot of the networking events I attended were like lunchtime events. And obviously, I don't think I would have been able to do that. In public school. Even in college, there were a lot of meetings I had to turn down because I had classes at that time, and sometimes they were just too good of opportunities not to miss. I just told my professors, like, I'm sorry, this is a networking event, I have to go to it. And a lot of times, as long as you were honest with them, they were supportive and like okay with it. But I also went to a smaller school, so I had a personal connection with my teachers. So I think it also has taught me that communication will get you like a long way. Like, yeah, even if you're struggling with something, or even if you can't do it all. Like if you just tell people that and are honest with them instead of lying, saying you're sick or anything like that, I think being honest is like the most important, because normally or sometimes they'll be willing to work with you.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't want to speak for you, but where would you gauge the educational benefit you received from going to those meetings compared to your book work that you were doing or work that you'd be doing in a public school?
Oh yeah. There's just like no comparison with it all.
That's what I thought you'd say. I'm just curious. I just
Yeah.
wanted you to say it.
No. Yeah, there's definitely no comparison. I was even talking to somebody. I actually didn't want to go to college originally. My parents really wanted me to. But the things I learned in my business classes in college were outdated, irrelevant. Just, I feel really bad saying that, but I mean, they weren't that great. However, my professors were really amazing. They had connections to the community, and those are the people that I'm still in contact with today. Those are the people that have actually helped me grow my business, because I don't think there was really anything that I learned in the classroom setting that helped me with my business, advanced me in the business world, or was something I could not learn on Google.
Wow.
So that's not for every single major. My sister is a pre-med major. Obviously, I don't recommend learning how to do open heart surgery from Google. I'm not advocating for that.
But you probably could.
No.
But I do think that like networking in person is really underrated, and I think students should take advantage of that more.
Absolutely. That's an awesome point. That's really cool to hear. Our daughter's 9, our oldest is 9, but
Okay.
that's exactly something we spoke about when we talked about homeschooling was, well, what if she had the opportunity when her schoolwork's over midday to go do a internship or volunteer somewhere and grab all that experience when these other kids are staring at a wall in class until 4:00 in the afternoon. And it's true, like as you said, like all that experience you received is like priceless. Awesome.
Even with volunteering opportunities, like you said, there's so many different avenues that they could explore. It doesn't have to be business. It could be volunteering.
Sure.
It could just be an interest or a hobby. So I know some students that just love techie things, like STEM things, just letting them explore, tinker, and really just do whatever they want to do. And then that kind of leads them down multiple rabbit trails. And then, you just never know where it will lead.
Yeah.
So those are all great benefits. Did you have any struggles or challenges being homeschooled?
Yeah. Honestly, I think not really, but I think it's because it fit my personality. I don't think homeschooling is perfect, and I don't think homeschooling is for like everybody by any means. Like I said, both of my sisters ended up graduating from a public school. One of them wanted to join like a theater program, and the other one was wanting to do gymnastics in school, and so she wanted like a high school transcript because of that, and like college scouts, all that kind of thing. But I think for me personally, it just really allowed me to get my work done and just get on with my life. But that's just my personality. So
no, that's great to hear. Actually, that's really refreshing and exciting to hear.
Yeah, because there's not one thing that's for everybody. Like we don't sit here and say everybody should homeschool, because that is not the case. We're both products of public school. We both have degrees, and I'll sit here and tell you that I do wish I probably had been homeschooled when I was a kid. The opportunities that would have been there, and I don't think a degree is for everybody.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't think
like
a college degree, I don't think that's useful in every situation. I really don't. I think it's a waste of money for a whole lot of people.
Exactly, it is, especially if you're going. Like I said, I graduated without any debt, but I know students with $50,000 in debt, and with like a job that they could have gotten without the degree right now.
Yes, and a job that it will be very hard for them to pay that off in a lifetime.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's another thing I love talking about is I think everybody's conditioned to think, oh, you have to have debt, but that is absolutely not the case. I know so many people that have graduated debt-free. There's a million ways to do it. You just have to get creative, penny pinch when you can, but it's totally possible. It's not like some distant dream.
No, it's not. It's something we talk about all the time, and I tell people that I work with that come into what I do. Younger crowd. You don't have to do that. The society tells you that it's supposed to be normal. Like, yeah, everybody takes 60 grand out for school. Yeah, everybody takes $50,000 out for a new vehicle as soon as they get out of college.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And I tell them, like, that's the last thing you want to do entering in any time in your life, but entering into your life at 22 years old.
Yeah,
you're destroying the beginning of your life with that debt. It would be
exactly.
almost impossible to ever crawl your way out of that hole,
Hmm.
and it's not necessary.
Exactly.
Uh,
Hmm.
so it's really
100%
nice.
agree.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear that you, and that was that a plan?
Yeah, so this was something I had planned when I was younger, and I wouldn't have been able to do it if I wouldn't have graduated early. So that was also a part of it. But college is so expensive, honestly. Like even if you go to a community college, it's still expensive.
Sure.
But yeah,
This is so, I don't know if people realize that it really is. This is very rare to have that thinking. I feel like that's like an up and coming way of thinking, is
Mhm.
that college can be debt free. And I guess because we didn't carry on student loans into our marriage, we were
That's
blessed.
awesome. Yeah,
And that's just amazing that you were thinking of this when you were younger. So
yeah.
did your parents even bring that up, or you just, as you dug deeper into your own business, you started to think about that?
Oh no, my parents are super thrifty.
They are.
My parents are incredibly thrifty. So at the time when I began homeschooling, I had two siblings, but when I turned about 10, my parents ended up having two biological children. I'm adopted, and the oldest of the three of us are adopted. So in total, there was five of us, and that's how I grew up. That was the majority of my upbringing, I guess, with five of us. And so
Mhm.
we kind of had to be thrifty, especially during the recession.
Yeah.
I was going to say the depression. I'm like, that's not the depression.
Not yet.
Through the recession, so during that time my mom gardened a lot and she taught us how to clip coupons, frugality, budget, all that kind of thing, and that really shaped me and my sisters all, because we're all like this. So
That's
Mm.
we are too. I grew up.
Mhm.
I actually grew up. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents,
hmm.
and they grew up. They came from, their parents came from Italy,
Okay, yeah.
and they grew up like that. Everybody had a garden.
Yep.
You just
Hmm.
spent what you had to. You didn't buy like niceties because they couldn't afford it.
Exactly, yeah.
And you know, I saw that growing up, and I thank God that I brought that into the marriage, because and so did
Hmm.
she with her family, because I see people who are in massive amounts of debt, and they look really stressed out.
Yeah.
And we don't stress
Especially,
about that.
yeah, and especially right now with how uncertain everything is, it is nice to be able to know like you don't have thousands of dollars worth of debt
Mhm.
Sure.
and something that's uncertain that you didn't need in the first place. I mean, it's not like it was a medical necessity or something. It was,
Right. Sometimes sometimes you can't help it with certain things, certain people, but
yeah,
that's really great. College is not one of those things.
Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so that's really nice to hear, and I'm sure there's gonna be some other people listening that's really cool for them to hear that
Mhm.
Hmm.
somebody you plan that before you even went to school at a young age,
Yeah.
and had it in your mind to go do that, because you can't show up to the school and then think about that later, because
Yeah.
by that
It's,
point they've already had your signature 5 times on a piece of paper signing student loans, right?
Mhm.
yeah, it's a lot harder, especially when you get into college. So the earlier you can plan, like this doesn't have to be like a plan that when they're 12, like, oh my gosh, you have to go to college debt free,
No.
but just getting them to think about, when you get your whole paycheck, maybe you don't spend it all, maybe save some of it. I have so many friends who made really good money in high school and college. They're very hard workers, but then they have no money in their bank account because they spent it all. I'm like, oh
Mhm.
my goodness. And so yeah, it's not always about like hard work and living thrifty. It's learning how to manage your money well, because you could be making a lot of money, but if you're spending it all, then I mean, yeah.
And that exactly, you're right. That you can make $1 million, and if you spend 98% of it, you're in a worse spot than somebody who makes 50,000 and saves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's great, especially at 22. That's really good to hear somebody say that, because
Mhm.
that is not the mindset of most people.
It is
Doesn't
not.
matter how old you are, really, but the mindset of most people is spend every penny I have on cool stuff.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's a pet peeve of mine.
Us too, that's really cool, because we talk about this all the
Mhm.
time, and um, the ability to not stress out on a rainy day when you need that little
Yeah.
extra money.
Mm.
And I think that's something we talk about too, as far as teaching the kids. They
Mhm.
don't teach that in school.
Yeah.
and I think it's something that's completely missed in public education is,
Absolutely.
yeah, it is
Financial literacy.
managing
Financial
your
literacy,
financial
yeah.
literacy, managing your money and your funds.
Yeah.
It's really a travesty because there's so many people who have really, started their life off in a very poor position because they haven't been taught that.
Mm-hmm.
We were lucky. I really wasn't taught that. I wouldn't say that. I just saw what my family did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it should be taught in public schools.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Another main concern that I feel like parents have is if their child is deciding the college route, will they have any issues come time to apply for college being a homeschool student? So in your experience, did you have any difficulties when you applied for college?
So I did not take my college search that seriously. I only applied to one college out of
Really,
sheer
you don't seem like the
laziness.
type of person that wouldn't take your college search seriously.
And they were known for being very homeschool friendly, and I had like zero problems getting in.
Nice.
But I know a lot of other public school students who went to different schools, like bigger schools that weren't as homeschool friendly. And I think what for homeschoolers, it comes down to your SAT or your ACT scores. Connie Albers, she's a speaker and an author, and she homeschooled her 5 kids. And test scores are really important when you're homeschooling, because that's kind of a way of saying, hey, my child's competitive. They have the great GPA, but these aren't just like mom gave them the GPA. Here are their test scores to prove it. And if they are in high school, they can take CLEP tests or AP tests and start testing out of things at the collegiate level. And obviously, once you've passed that and you already have some college credit under your belt, then it's kind of obvious that they're ready for that. But I think it just depends, because I know some homeschoolers who decided to go back in high school had some problems with the public school system. The public school wanted to put them in the most basic classes. But then as time went on, after like a couple of weeks of school and this child's getting all A's, it's like, oh, maybe we should have put them in the honors class.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, we tried to tell you, but so I think it just depends on the school you're applying to, and just knowing the school's requirements ahead of time will save you like a lot of headache later.
That's good to know. I think that's reassuring to hear, especially for somebody who did it.
Mm-hmm.
So I read this article, and it was by a director of entrepreneurship program at a university. And he was basically stating that homeschoolers make up some of his most talented entrepreneurship students. And some of the reasons he listed were because they're driven by curiosity and love to learn. So I feel like everything that you just said, I think you can agree with that, right? That you have, through your homeschooling experience, those things just grew inside of you, right?
Absolutely. And I think it is because I had so much time to develop those. For example, in my 4 years of public school, I never learned about history. Didn't know what Europe was, didn't know anything about the world.
That's me.
Yeah, I told somebody that and they didn't believe me. They're like, you didn't do any history or science. I'm like, I did not in any of my years in public school. So I think it did help that I did learn history from books. That is why I think I love history so much. If I would have just learned it from a textbook, I think I would have been bored with it, because it's boring from the textbook.
It is.
But I think getting those different experiences really contributed a lot to that.
Yeah. Now that I'm homeschooling our children, I told him, I feel like I am going back to school all over again, because I'm learning alongside them. And I find history so interesting. And I never thought I would say that, because like you said, it was so boring in school. I don't remember anything. Like,
exactly.
forget it. Like, where is that state? Or what country is that part of? But if you learn the right way, it definitely can be interesting. Which brings me to, we recently purchased one of your entrepreneurship projects for kids. It's the Creating a Cookie Biz.
Oh yeah.
We got that for our 9-year-old daughter, because we are learning that she absolutely loves to bake, and she's already talking about like one day opening up this cafe.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, it is. And she's like very passionate about it. She bakes cookies all the time for our neighbors. They love her.
Oh my gosh.
And she'll do it without like hesitation. It's not a chore for her. And that's how we know that there's like this passion there. And she even will sometimes daydream that when she has this cafe or bakery that she's going to be overseas traveling with it, and that we're going to be traveling and visiting her. And
I love that so much. Oh my gosh.
so when we got her this project, we just felt like this was going to be the perfect thing to just plant the seed and how a business works. And just
Mm-hmm.
the basic foundation. We love that we found this on your site. And on top of that, when I showed her your website, she was like in awe. She's like, look at all the colors. It's so beautiful. Is that who you're going to interview?
I love her.
She was like
Oh
awestruck by it all.
my gosh. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then we also today we printed off your fall STEAM activities, because being today is the first day of fall, of course, it was appropriate. And she herself told us yesterday that she said, Mama, I don't want you to do school tomorrow. I'm in charge of tomorrow, and I'm going to plan all the activities for the day. And it's all going to be, related to fall. And I showed you her list. She wrote up this list of things that we were doing, and it was impressive. And she included like math and how do the leaves change color and
Oh
why
my
do they change
gosh.
color. So we got our science in there, and then her different reading picture books, and then she busted out this print off from your website, and then not only we hit some of those today, but then she wants to hit more of them throughout the season.
Mm-hmm.
With all that being said, I'm still exploring the wonderful resources on your site, but can you share with our listeners things that you do offer on there?
Yeah. So it is interesting. Somebody was asking me, what do you have on your website? I said, I honestly don't know. Like there's so many different random things, but they all have one thing in common. Like they came from my brain, which is scary and great at the same time, I guess. So my first products were a series of cheat sheets, and these were color-coded notes that I'd originally created for myself because I was tired of flipping through my Abeka textbook trying to find out a certain fraction, a certain like definition or something, and I was writing them all down in my notebook. And then when I started my blog, I realized that other people might be able to benefit from these too, and that's kind of what took off from there. So I have a lot of the cheat sheets. I have a lot of different resources for teaching history or science with movies and books. That's one of my biggest passions.
Oh, I can't wait. I saw that list and I was like, we definitely need to hit some of these.
Yeah, there's like so many of them. And then I just have a bunch of random resources depending on my mood, I guess. Resources dedicating to learning Spanish, Hebrew, my two favorite languages, all these random things. But I think that that's one of the things I love about this job. It's because when I was younger, I was really struggling with what do I want to do? I had a passion for World War II and the Holocaust. And I knew I wanted to do something with that. But I thought my only two options were being a history teacher or being a museum worker. And I thought, well, I didn't really want to work at the Holocaust Museum in DC. And I also don't really want to become a history teacher because I only like World War II history. So these are all my thoughts as a teenager. I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? I also pursue my passions. And my blog and this business was a really great way for me to combine everything I love and all of the random interests and hobbies I have into one big thing. That doesn't sound like it should work, but it does work. So
it's working. Yeah.
Do you attribute your ability to figure out what you could actually do with your passion to I guess homeschooling and having that time to research? Because that's something else we talk about a lot is when we went to school, I'm sure it's the same now. They push a handful of professions and college is a must.
yes.
And all I knew was I had to go to college, but I had no idea what I really cared about doing. But it's okay as long as you go to college, everything's going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
And I'm being sarcastic.
No, I know. I totally understand.
I know you can see me, but people listening can't. So I'm being completely sarcastic. And what I wish was that I knew I could have had somebody show me all the different possibilities of how you can make money and be happy and what you can, and the different professions that are really out there. But they don't show you that at school.
No.
And that's really interesting that you brought that up. And is there any one thing that you could attribute that to when you were homeschooling?
I think for me, I did take a gap year in between homeschooling and entering college, and I use that solely to grow my business. But I know other students who went to public school that were able to take a gap year just to work. So you're not getting into debt with money, but you're also just working. You're trying to figure life out. You're doing something that interests you, but maybe you find out you're halfway through this job and you're like, I hate this job. It's not for me. This area isn't for me. But before you spent all of that money on college debt towards this degree that you're already working towards, you already know if this industry is right for you. So I think exploring a lot of different options, especially in their late teenage years, is really important. And I also think with homeschooling, one of the things that I got from that was being able to be like self-taught, especially hit me in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. I used to be able to like be pretty good about figuring things out. When I hit that upper level math, I'm like, I don't understand any of this. And I had to Google it to figure out the answer. And sometimes I had to get kind of creative with what I was Googling because I didn't like the resource. So I think just having that mindset of like, if you have a question, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to Google it. You're not going to know all of the answers or everything. It's just that mindset of if you don't know something, figure it out.
Oh man, so awesome. Hear you say that. It really is, because that's a huge, that's something you have to really show most people is that,
Yes.
look, it's okay that you don't know the answer to something.
Yeah.
Go find out how to find out.
That sounds really harsh what I'm talking about. I don't mean it that way.
No,
it's such a good thing.
Not at all. It's a great thing. It's people get embarrassed when they don't know something, but to teach a kid that to not get embarrassed when you don't know it.
Yeah.
But to teach them, now you know how to go find the answer. So go do it.
Yep.
And now you can learn anything ever in the entire world. As long as you know that one thing, you can learn anything. As long as you know how to go, where to go find it. Yes. And so that's really cool to hear you say that.
And I'm a perfectionist. So, I mean, this was really hard for me to learn. I didn't just I wasn't born totally like this or anything. But I think like being able to say, okay, Samantha, it is okay to make mistakes. It's okay to mess up, to fail. For example, like right now this year, my goal was to learn Spanish. And during my Spanish lessons, I make so many mistakes. It's so embarrassing. My face has turned bright red multiple times. But without those mistakes, I would have never been able to have a conversation with somebody in Spanish. So I think it's just learning to be one of my favorite movies is Meet the Robinsons, because it talks about it's okay to fail. It's like okay to make those mistakes. They're not a bad thing. They're not failures. You have to have those failures to grow. And I think that's such an important skill, like with kids, because I think everybody just has this perfectionist mindset. And so that can help.
Absolutely. And that you recognize it so early. But I do think I personally feel that you can teach your kids that if they are homeschooled, because you have more time with them to do that. Unless they have a really awesome teacher in the system that does, teach that in their classes. But again, you're at the mercy of them. So I feel like we have that gift to be able to show our kids that. And we were just saying that last night about our oldest, who she was about your age when she started homeschooling. We started homeschooling her in 3rd grade.
Okay.
And up until then, it was like she just did. What was it that you were saying? The way that if she doesn't want to figure out an answer.
So she picked up a really nasty habit from going to school, and that was if she didn't understand something, she would ask you a million questions. But it wasn't like she was interested. It was to stall the process. So she just keep asking questions that didn't really get to the point. And I said, sometimes you have to stop asking questions and just do it. But we've been able to take care of that in homeschooling. But that's
really good.
Yes, it was very obvious what was going on. I think she would ask the teacher questions until the teacher would just do it for her, is what it was going on.
And give her the answer without her working to find out the answer.
Yes.
I mean, that's smart though, but I understand.
Yeah.
Your kids all seem very smart.
Laid the system.
Yeah, really milked the system there. Good job. But so yeah, we've been able to break her that habit, but it was something that we noticed, and we said this could have gone on through high school, because I know kids do it. Because I deal with a lot of young adults in my job, and you see that they've never really worked or figured out anything on their own in their entire life.
I know.
When you talk to them, you're like man, go, go figure this out. And they just like stare at you with this blank face. I'm like, oh, you've never been told to just go figure something out. Somebody's handed these answers to you your whole life, and they've crippled you.
And I do blame the public school. I mean, I'm not saying I believe in personal responsibility too.
Of course.
But the public school system definitely has that mindset of, this is your work, you fill in the blanks like we want you to. And if it's not that, then you get an F. So, I mean.
And a lot of it has to do with, we always bring this up. I think every episode I've brought this up, because I don't want to get punched in the face by one of her sisters. They're all teachers. Yes. So, so I don't want to get hit next time I see them. But the key is to have a really good teacher, which is your sister.
She is.
Your sister. And the fact that there's so many kids in the system that most teachers can't do that.
It's hard.
It's hard.
Oh yeah.
So it's the system. It's not necessarily the teacher, right?
Absolutely. Like, I had a great teacher when I was in 2nd and 3rd grade. It was the same teacher, and she did a really great job at helping me learn at a more advanced level. And I knew I wasn't going to get that lucky every single year.
Right.
And so I think homeschooling just worked out. And like for my sisters, they had really good teachers in high school, but it just depends, because if you have a bad teacher, it's horrible.
It is.
But a good teacher can really make a difference in your life. So it's definitely not teachers are all bad or anything like that.
No. I mean, I had teachers that changed my life because they were so positive. But if I didn't have them, I would have had no confidence in myself. But I had that one teacher that believed in me.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember that. And not everybody gets that lucky.
Exactly.
So I think that's a great point.
Is there an overall vision that you have for your platform?
I'm not 100% sure. Within the past year, I've been really working on outsourcing tasks in a way that was sustainable. So not just like a single task, like, hey, can you help me with this? But something that was more permanent and like a system, like an organization. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, is trying to grow the business in a way that doesn't burn me out, and also that is sustainable for like the future.
No, that's great.
I don't know what that looks like yet, so.
Well, it's constantly evolving, I'm sure, right?
It is. It's like, well, it was crazy because after the pandemic hit, it was that weekend in Indiana when everything was shut down like instantly. I had this post go crazy viral, and from then on, like everything skyrocketed. Everything over doubled overnight, and so it was just really overwhelming. I was really thankful for it. I was not complaining, but it was just a lot to handle, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had product to ship out. I had no idea like how I was going to do it. I'm like crying, sobbing, answering like customer support emails. But I just that mindset of just figuring everything out. This isn't going to be permanent, and take advantage of this opportunity. And so now that I'm more sane after that incident, I'm ready to grow it more. And yeah.
But how much did you learn from that bump in the road? I mean, I'm sure that was.
I learned a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't bring everything back to homeschooling, but the way you were raised, obviously that you didn't give up when that happened.
Things got tough.
And that's the only time you learn in life.
Exactly. Like I've made so many bad like business decisions. Learning Color is actually my 3rd brand name, which I do not recommend when you're starting a business. But both times, like no one taught me anything about branding, and each time I think the rebrand was necessary. But those were 2 major mistakes that had so many ramifications on the back end. But without those like mistakes, I would have never have came up with a name like Learning Color.
So you're not supposed to keep your business name fresh every couple of years?
No, it's horrible. Don't ever do that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, looking back at it, it's so cringy. But like without those mistakes, I just recently made a mistake with somebody I hired, which was kind of expensive. But you live and you learn. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes mistakes cost money, but you'll probably never do that again, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But I love hearing this. It's so real. This is great.
Yeah, like my business is not always perfect. It's not always, this great thing. It's definitely a trial and error process, but it's just that matter of you have to keep going and learning from your mistakes. If you keep making the same mistake over and over, I mean.
Then it's your fault.
Yeah. But I mean, if you learn from them, I think that's what's the most important part.
Yeah, no, that's really refreshing, because I think not just in business, but in life, it's nice to hear that, because we brought this up as well. But in today's world with like social media, everybody likes their life to look this like squeaky clean thing on social media, like everything's perfect and please follow me, because everything just, it looks like my life is all put together and I have it all figured out.
Yeah.
We all know that's not the case, and you're lying.
Yeah.
I feel like we'd be such good friends if we were.
That's why we like doing this. That's what we were saying before we started. It's like, how else would we ever meet people like you if we weren't doing this? We were talking about this the other night, and I said, you know what this reminds me of? We like to travel up until this year. And now we just travel kind of locally. But the coolest thing about traveling for us is that typically during a regular day in your regular life, you just don't have the time to, like, all of a sudden you meet somebody and you're like, hey, you know what? Would you like to have a cup of coffee or a drink or whatever and sit down and talk? Because you seem like an interesting person. But when we travel, we do that.
You can.
And it's the coolest part about traveling. You come home and it's the first thing you remember is like, man, that was just really neat to sit down with those people from, like, the last place we went, this was a couple years ago, was Iceland.
Okay, my roommate was there and she loved it so much.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah,
awesome. Recommend it to anybody. But we met just like the coolest people there because we, you know, when you're traveling, you have the time to sit down and hang out. And we said that's kind of like what this is, podcasting, is we meet people that we never would have met in our everyday life. And we've been invited to people's houses.
Yeah.
Yes, already.
Like, hey, if you're ever in the area, come on by. You're welcome for dinner. And
My apartment's small, but I have a nice couch. I mean,
we're not inviting ourselves. But it is very awesome. And I completely forgot what I was talking about before I started talking about
Do
that.
you road school then, or is this in the summers, or?
Not really. What we do have here is we actually have a camper.
Okay.
An hour away at a lake. So we go there during we have until like next month and then it gets closed down for the winter, but we go there almost every week and she'll do homeschooling there.
Okay.
But before COVID, like when we did these random trips, we were taking them and it was typically without children. It'd be our low time trips that we just like to go once a year, like a big trip. And that's what it reminded us of, just sitting down and chatting with people that you would never meet in your everyday life because it's so
really cool.
Yeah, I didn't make that clear. Chatting with people without kids.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Because that's the only time you can have a chat with somebody.
I do not have kids yet, so I cannot relate yet.
If you do one day, you'll remember this. That's what they were talking about.
My dog's sleeping. He's typically like going around crazy, but he's asleep right now, so everything's quiet.
When I got up like 10 minutes ago, it was because our dog was barking incessantly at something outside, so I had to put him in his room. So we understand.
Yes. Now, you did mention you briefly mentioned, so I want to go back to some of those interesting hobbies that you have. If you could talk about them between your World War II buff and learning Hebrew and let's not forget Miss Indiana. So a little bit.
Okay, so the first year of homeschooling, that's when I discovered World War II for the first time. I picked up this book. It was called I Am David by Anne Holm. And looking back at everything I know now, the book was set in 1950, so it's actually a little bit after World War II. But again, I did not have any knowledge of history. I didn't know what was going on. And the story was purposefully vague, so it wasn't like, oh, you know, these were the communists, these were the bad people. It doesn't even mention the word communist. But looking back at it now, that's what I realized what was going on in the story. And it was the most well-written book, and it's still probably the most well-written children's book I've ever read. And from then on, I was so interested in the time period. I was so interested in everything that was going on with the story. I'm like, I want to learn everything there is to know about it. And eventually, through my randoms, like scattered resources, I came across the Holocaust. And at first I was just so confused. I was wondering, like, how did this happen? Like, physically, I'm very analytical. Like, how do you physically just kill all of these people? The second thing I wondered, I'm like, can this happen again? All these different things. And from that, I began researching and finding out all of these amazing stories from World War II and the Holocaust that aren't taught in public school systems. They're not taught in schools, and I'm not sure why, because these people are incredible. And so that's kind of why I wanted to start the blog, because I said, Well, there's all of these amazing people from history. There's all of these amazing stories that defy everything I've read in a textbook, everything that I've talked to and with people. It's like they dispel all of these common myths about the Holocaust and World War II. And I wanted to share all of these stories. And that's kind of where Learn in Color was born.
Wow.
From a desire to share all of these obscure like historical stories that nobody else knew about but me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really wanted to get them out there and tell them to people, because in this world, like especially in my generation, we idolize the Kardashians, we idolize all these pop stars, Cardi B, like all these types of people. But we don't know about all these amazing historical figures in the world. And so I think that that's really something that I was passionate about getting out there. And that's kind of where my love of Hebrew came from. Like I said a little bit earlier, one of the things that I was considering as a job was working in a Holocaust museum. And I thought the only two options where I would be, like where I would enjoy my job would be the museum in DC, which I didn't really want to move to DC, or the one in Israel. So obviously I'm like, well, I'm going to learn Hebrew naturally if I want to get this job in Israel. So that's kind of where my interest in Hebrew came from. I lost a lot of it, but I still can read and write it, and I can recognize a lot of words. But I love the Hebrew language, and people were asking me, well, why don't you want to learn Spanish? I said, because I don't want to learn Spanish. And I was so adamant against it. And I, like, looking back, I was super stubborn about it, but I wasn't ready to. But right now I am learning Spanish, and I love the language, and I'm ready to learn it. I'm excited to learn it. But I think if it would have been forced on me as a high schooler, I would have hated the language, like never wanted anything to do with it. So I think like it's really important to not always go with what's most common or what could be seen as useful, because I know so many students who took 4 years of Spanish in high school and can't speak anything with Spanish just because of the way it's taught. So just because it's the status quo of what you should be learning in school, if your students' passions don't align with that, that might not always be the most, like the best option for them.
Oh,
That's a great point.
that is a great point. Yes. You're full of golden nuggets today, Samantha.
Yeah.
And how did you, I think I have an idea of how you came to this, but how did you come to competing for Miss Indiana?
So the pageantry thing was super random. I'm a computer nerd. I'm a book nerd. Pageants were never something that were on my radar. But when I was 16 years old, I entered our local county fair queen contest. I'd grown up in 4-H. I loved it. And the winner won $1,000 for scholarship money. And I'm like, that's some great money. So scholarships is really what motivated me to start in pageantry. And so far, I've won over like $7,000 through competing in pageants. So that also helped me graduate debt-free, and it's helped me with grad school as I have dabbled in some grad work. So that was a big motivation in helping me graduate debt-free, and it's something I really enjoy doing. And through that organization, there's all of these different stereotypes about pageant girls being ditzy, all of that. But the girls I compete with are seriously some of the smartest and most like intelligent and passionate women in the state of Indiana, and the majority of them are debt-free or have little or have little debt. And I think it's just that mindset of being a go-getter, getting full scholarships, always wanting to be ambitious, giving back to the community. All of those traits are in all of the girls I compete with. And so I love it.
That is awesome. I heard a couple of your interviews with them. Did you find that many were homeschooled themselves, or was it a mix?
There actually weren't that many. I have interviewed a couple girls, and there were a couple girls that were homeschooled, but it's the majority, I think, were from public school.
Okay. And when did you start 4-H? Our kids do 4-H, so we love 4-H.
Okay. I was a 10-year member, so right when I was able to.
Really?
But I love 4-H so much.
What was your thing in 4-H?
So I'm from Elkhart County, which is the largest 4-H fair in the nation, and we are the only one that has a club called Media Club, and so we write the fair newsletter Monday through Friday of Fair Week. And I really liked it because the programs that I was learning there, I did not know it at the time, but those are the exact same programs that I use every single day for my job. Yeah. So InDesign and Photoshop, my first experiences were at elementary school from 4-H, and I didn't even know it.
That is cool. We tell a lot of people about 4-H, and if they're not from like the rural areas,
yeah,
they have no idea what we're talking about.
Nobody in California knows what 4-H or cares about 4-H.
And the funny part is there's a ton of farms in California, like ranchers and stuff. But we started the kids when they were same, right? 4?
Yeah, right when you can start at 5 years old.
Yeah.
In Florida, it was 5 years old. So
Yeah, we were in Florida before this, but their first thing was we had them raise chickens.
Okay.
And so they did that, and it was great for them because she would have to get up in front of, most of them were older kids, and she'd have to do a presentation at our local club.
Yeah.
And she'd have to do a presentation about chicken. It wasn't anything too intricate, but
it's nerve-wracking for a little kid to get up and do that.
It's nerve-wracking for 99% of adults to stand up in front of somebody and talk and speak. So I was telling her, I was like, you have no idea how important this is to start at this young. And what other club really does that? Not a whole lot. There's some, but there's that. I think that's the biggest thing with 4-H is it teaches them how to be, have speaking skills, but like responsibilities that aren't required, and a lot of other activities.
Yeah.
And just like going back to the whole college thing, so here it's all through Purdue University, which is in Indiana, and a lot of students who did grow up in 4-H and who are 10-year 4-H members, they go on to Purdue, and because they are involved in 4-H and they have that connection, Purdue gives them really good scholarships for that. So all of those seeds that you plant when you're younger, like you don't know where they'll lead, and they could lead into some really amazing opportunities down the road with longevity and just like putting yourself out there and trying to do things.
Wow.
So
good. Yeah, it gives us, that's why we have
gives us hope here.
Yeah, that's really good stuff to hear. But just pause real quick. So you just realize you do have more than Notre Dame. You also have Purdue.
That's true. We do have Purdue.
Indiana has 2 things.
2.
I'm just kidding. People don't know what to think of when we move to Ohio, and we love it here. So
okay, where are you guys at in Ohio?
Right outside of Cleveland.
Oh, okay.
And to anyone that hasn't been to Cleveland, that sounds horrible. But Cleveland is awesome.
I went there last year, and I went to Cuyahoga, is it called?
Yeah, that's where we live, right next to Cuyahoga County. Yeah.
Yeah, and I liked it there.
You did. You don't have to lie. It's okay. You can tell.
I had a friend from college there, and then Colleen Kessler, she's another blogger.
Yes.
And Raising Lifelong Learners, and she lives in that area.
Oh, she does. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting. No, we love it here. When we told people it was our #1 pick to come here because we're a military family, they were like, why? Where are you going?
You came from Florida and you chose to go to Cleveland, Ohio.
Yep.
Yeah.
We love the Midwest.
I came here from LA. I'm like, why did you come here from LA to here? Like, what? She's like, well, I just was looking at random colleges, and this one kind of went on the dart of the map. I'm like, Indiana, what?
Yeah, the Midwest is awesome. People just don't know.
Yeah.
It's a secret.
All right, so you started your blog, like you said, at the age of 14. 7 years later, it has reached over 4 million people.
Yeah.
What are some words of advice that you can give homeschooling students and their parents to help them in their educational journey and beyond? You've given a lot of advice, but maybe just like a last minute tie up here with advice.
I think really just let your children learn, because you don't know where it will take them. A common question I get at conventions or when I'm speaking is, my child only likes Fortnite and Minecraft. Help me. I'm like, oh, I don't know your child well enough to help you. However, I can say there are so many different unique jobs available. If your child really is obsessed with Minecraft, maybe start going into like how it's made, how video games are made. My cousin's currently in Florida right now studying computer design. And so there are so many different jobs available in technology, and technology is the future. And so those jobs are going to be the most in demand. App developing, all of that thing. So even if your child has an interest like Minecraft or Fortnite, there are so many different ways to take that and make a positive spin on it. It doesn't have to be just negative technology time, and just let them learn just wherever it will take them, because you never know.
That's great.
That is great. So
you're going to wrap it up.
To wrap it up, we wanted to ask you some questions just off the handle, and then we can let you go because we know you're busy. All right. So we're going to start here. You said you forgot this, and unless it's not true, but I saw it on your website. You like to cook.
I like to cook. I'm not good at it.
That's okay.
So.
That's okay. So favorite thing to cook?
Oh, I can make a really good chicken fried rice. My sister, who is a really good cook and super judgy, said, wow, this is actually really good because she roasts everything I cook. But I can make a really good chicken fried rice.
Okay. Favorite book?
I Am David by Anne Holm.
Okay. Word of the day in Hebrew?
Midbar, it means wilderness.
Okay. Your favorite fact about World War II?
Oh, goodness. Hardest question. Right.
We can edit the pause. Don't worry.
Yeah,
Oh gosh.
okay.
Albert Einstein was Jewish and he came here before World War II and he kind of helped with the atomic bomb, which he later regretted in his life.
I like that one. All right. And finally, where can people find you?
You can find me at learnincolor.com on my website or Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest under that username, Learn in Color.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, Samantha, Shank, thank you so much for your time and you have a beautiful day.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank
All right.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much.